What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down a route that DBs cannot guard if you run it correctly. So I hope this video helps you guys out, but also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you want to improve your hands, but maybe you don't have a quarterback to throw to you 24/7, check out that very first link in the description below for our 30-day catching program 2.0. So if you already got our original catching program, this is the next step up with more advanced exercises to help your grip strength, hand-eye coordination improve, repetition drills for catching that do not require a QB. So check out that very first link below, fellas, if you want to get better hands. Let's get started with this video. So now we're going to be talking about a whip route today. So what is a whip route? First, we're going to be looking at this kind of more traditional look here from Cole Beasley. Then we're going to talk about how to run a whip route versus press. And then we're going to be going over kind of a whip route where you're taking more steps selling the slant or the drag. So this is the more traditional version of a whip route. So a whip route is where you're kind of running almost a slant route and then you whip it back out 90 degrees to the sideline. I'm going to play this thing full speed again. It's from Cole Beasley. He takes 3 steps on the slant, sells the whip, and snaps on his inside foot. So you don't always have to snap down on your inside foot. I prefer it. That's the way I teach it, but we're also going to talk about snapping with your outside foot in a second here in the third example. So when Beasley comes off, this is kind of like the more traditional whip route version. So whenever I'm running a whip, it's technically a double move, right? It is going to be a slant and you go right back out 90, but you're going to keep your hips and your shoulders faced to the quarterback the entire time. Some people I've heard call this maybe a return route. Some people have called this a pivot route. I call this a whip, which is kind of the more common term I would think. So when he comes off the ball, you see it's a 3-step slant. 1, 2, 3. Now, when you break off of this third step on the whip, it's just like any traditional double move. You have to sell the slant. My goal is to get this linebacker, this safety, this DB, whoever it is, to crash down on the slant. So when I break to the slant, I got to make sure that I snap my eyes around. I'm running with some speed. I'm maintaining my stride. But most importantly, your hips and shoulders are committed to the slant. I can't tell you how many times guys will run a double move. They'll break, but their left hip in this case and their left shoulder will be drifting back to the side that they are breaking. Or in this case, they'll start to turn early with their inside hip and shoulder because they're trying to whip out. You have to trust your hips and let the hip drop snap you down. So when he breaks, you see 1, 2, 3, 4. The hip drop is what slows him down. He sold this thing, he ran with some speed, and that's what got this DB to crash down on it so we could create some separation. But the hip drop, fellas, you have to drop your hips first and then be able to drive out of this whip. Now, how's he able to get out of this in 2 steps? Now, a lot of people think that every single route that you run, every single time that you drop your hips, you have to get out in the least amount of steps possible. That's not always true. More often than not, it's about time. It's about eliminating wasted time. But you see when he breaks here, he breaks off of this third step. He's going to be stepping with his right, left, and then snapping on the third step. So when you guys snap on that third step, 1, 2, 3, and you drop down, it is super important that we put myself in a low explosive position. A good spot to try to shoot for is you want to try to bring your chin to your knee, because now when you bring your chin to your knee, that's a position where you come to balance. Now, what you would want to do with your fourth step, that's the third step, the fourth needs to hook around, and you are trying to get your hips and your shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage. So now when I hook that step around, my shin angles are at a positive shin angle. What do I mean by that? I mean that they're at almost like a 45-degree angle in the direction that I am going, which allows us to push off of that step and widen the distance with this DB. So if I can sell the route, drop on a dime, and get my feet in the right type of foot placement, it's okay if you take a couple extra steps there. As long as we are driving and trying to explode out, that can widen the distance from this DB, and I can create separation. So let's play this thing again full speed. That was the more traditional version of it. Now we're going to be talking about how you guys can run a whip route versus press coverage. So let's play this full speed. Great job by Beasley running the whip, breaking on the inside foot, then obviously accelerating upfield. So we got press coverage inside shade, and we have to run a whip route. So how would you guys do that? How do you guys want to attack this? So remember, what is the whip route usually selling? What's the first route of this double move? It's going to be a slant route. So how would you run a slant route versus press? That's how you want to think about this. So this wide receiver decides to go with a slide release, crossover into the whip. That is probably exactly how you would like to play this thing. Now let's play it again one more time. He attacks the outside shoulder, uses a crossover, and then he's able to snap it off. So Why would he do this? A lot of times when guys will run a whip and they have this press coverage inside shade, they'll try to force it, right? Oh, I have to run a whip, so I have to cross his face and run a slant. But the problem with that is that if you force this whip route and you take the inside release on the slant and this DB's inside shade, he's just going to squeeze you to the inside of the field, reroute you, and be right on your hip. You're not going to get much separation. You would have to treat it like how you'd run an actual slant. So when you run an actual slant against press, our goal is to kind of split this defender in half. I want to attack his outside shoulder because my goal is to make him think fade. So this wide receiver decides to go with the slide release. So when he slides to the outside, you see how he's sliding at almost a 45-degree angle. Now, I think this DB could maybe be a little bit more disciplined because this receiver's on the bottom of the numbers and the sideline is right here. Very unlikely that he's probably going to be running an outside route, like a fade, like an out route, like a comeback. So I think he was a little bit over anxious to open up the gate, but still, this is how you have to run the route. That's the only way that this works. I would maybe change the spacing up a little bit if I'm the offensive coordinator on this play. But again, you don't know what they're trying to work, what they've maybe set up in the past. So when he makes this crossover move, obviously selling the vertical, hips and shoulders are to the outside, and he is slipping underneath like how he would on a slant. Anytime that we work like a diamond release, a slide release, and we get that DB to open up his hips and we threaten him back underneath, he's thinking, oh crap, I got beat. Oh, I got to open up. I got to overcommit. I got to play this slant. I got to get to his front hip. And that is why it's very important when you're running this whip route, especially against press. When you break to the slant, you have to accelerate. We actually have to run hard because that is what forces that DB to commit, and that is what will get him to crash. And I can put the brakes on just like the last example. And again, just like the last example, you see what slows him down. Hip drop slows him down. That's what brings him to balance. He hooks the outside foot around to get hips and shoulders parallel, and this is that positive shin angle that I was talking about. He can drive off of this foot and accelerate to widen the gap with this DB. That is textbook right there. Now, some of you might be thinking, like, why would he go with like a slide release here? Isn't that a release that you only use on longer situations? So this slide release, right, it's like kind of like a patient shuffle to the outside if you're not familiar with it. You're still attacking the outside shoulder. You're still doing what you would need to do, but it's a slower version of it. Now, the reason why this wide receiver chooses that is because of the quarterback's footwork. Usually on a whip route, it is kind of a slower developing play. You know, quarterback's taking a 3-step drop. Maybe we have a whip route right here, and then we have a corner from like the tight end or the slot, whatever it is. He's not like necessarily like trying to throw this thing as quickly as possible. So we have to time up my release. We have to time up my route with the quarterback's footwork. So that's why he decides to come off the line and use this kind of like patient slide move, gives the crossover, then runs the slant. So it times up with the QB, and we are at where he needs me to be at the given time of the play. Let's play this thing again full speed. So how you would run a whip route versus inside shade press is exactly like how you would run a slant route versus inside shade press. Play it again full speed. Great job sliding, using that crossover, and then breaking this thing right off. All right, fellas, this next example here is going to be how you would run a whip route where maybe you're selling it off of like a drag route. So let's say you're, a mesh heavy team. Let's say you like to run a lot of like this concept. Like you got the X here, you got the slot, you got the slot, you got the Z. Let's say, maybe it's like a fade. We got a dig, and then we go mesh right here with the two slot receivers. So if you're a team that likes to run a lot of this, usually when you guys run your whip routes, it'll probably tend to look a little bit more like a drag. And that's what I know the Chargers like to do. So maybe they used to like to do this. I think it might be a different OC now. But when he breaks to the inside, running full speed, you see how he snaps on his outside foot. So why does he do that? Because when you're running a drag, you need to be able to sell this thing a little bit longer. So he goes here, watch what foot he breaks down on. That's his first, second, third, fourth, and then he breaks down his sixth step. So you would say like maybe his third outside step here. So let's come back again. That really sells the drag, and that really makes that DB overcommit. He's here. That's first outside, second, third. Snaps right on that third outside step all the way over the middle and then whips it back out. So that's when you would maybe want to snap on the outside foot. I think that it gets harder to snap on the inside foot the longer you have to sell the slant, the drag. Like for example, it's a little bit harder when you're running, like a fifth, like let's say you're running a 5-yard hitch. It's very easy to run that in 2 steps. But like let's say you're running like a 15-yard stop. The 5-yard hitch is easy to stop in 2 steps. The 15-yard stop is a little bit harder to stop in 2 steps. So maybe that's why they have him go outside leg. Maybe that's why he's more comfortable going outside leg. Maybe it's just like you have to get to a landmark and run the whip. Whatever it is, the main thing I want to talk about here is when you do snap with that outside foot, you have to focus on getting out and probably 3 to 5 steps. You don't want to waste too much time. Like I said, I'm not a big steps guy, but we can't waste a ton of time at the break point. So you see when he gets to this break point and he starts to snap down with this outside foot, he snaps. Remember, eyes have to sell, hips and shoulders have to sell, and we have to be running hard. Only way I get the DB to commit. So now when he snaps, look at this. He snaps here. He pivots the second step. So that's like the step that a lot of other guys were snapping down on. Then he hooks the third step around and he's able to drive. Now you see how he takes this little like kind of choppy step right here where he goes 1, 2, 3, and he double steps with the outside foot. That is only because he didn't get low enough on his hip drop. I think if he gets a little bit lower, he doesn't need to take that step and he's out in 3. But again, you see even some of the best route runners in the game will not take a perfect 2 steps, 3 steps at the break on this one. It is about selling. It is about being sudden with your hips and setting yourself up in a position to where you can accelerate out. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. So that's the other way to run this whip, fellas, off of a drag route. And sometimes you can snap down on the outside leg. Doesn't always have to be the inside leg. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like a full 30-day wide receiver catching program, no quarterback necessary, all the things wide receivers need to do for grip strength and hand-eye coordination, check out that very first link in the description below. I'll see you guys next time.